Eva Maha. Hello, I'm Jerry O'Neill, and I invite you to join me on the third leg of a global mystery tour, in which we will explore the worldwide influence of Ireland's musical and literary heritage, concentrating mostly on Ireland's forgotten bard, Thomas Moore. We will meet some remarkable characters and hear the fascinating and sometimes incredible stories associated with his poems and ballads. Our journey today will be a little convoluted with many diversions and tangents, but stay with me and it will all mesh together finally. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. So fasten your seatbelts and we're ready for takeoff. Now that's some choir. How many can recognize what part of our planet that's in? I guess the lady's attire gives the game away. Now here's a much smaller choral group.
'Twas you, sir.
'Tis true, sir.
'Twas you, sir.
'Tis true, sir. You
I
look
tell
so
you
very
very
blue,
blue,
sir.
sir.
I'm
'Twas
sure
you
you
that
kissed that pretty girl. 'Twas true, sir.
you. 'Twas you,
Oh, sir.
'tis
No,
true,
sir.
sir.
No, no,
sir.
no,
'Tis
no,
true,
sir.
sir.
How
You
can
look
you
so
very
very
blue,
blue,
sir?
sir.
I'm sure you kissed that pretty girl. 'Twas true, sir.
True.
'Twas you,
Oh,
sir.
no,
'Tis true,
no, sir.
'Twas you,
No, no,
sir.
no,
'Tis
no,
true,
no, sir. How
You
can
look
you
so
really
very
be
blue,
so, sir?
I'm sure you kissed that pretty girl. 'Twas true, sir. You.
Despite the difference in style and language, the span of half the globe, and the passing of more than 2 centuries, there is a link, although indirect, between the two songs. The humorous song performed here by the Deller Consort is called 'Twas You, Sir. That kind of song is known as a glee, usually a short song scored in different parts for a small choral group. Glees were particularly popular in the 18th century. Thomas Moore composed quite a few in his early career. But 'Twas You, Sir was composed by
'Twas you.
Irish Wellesley, 1st Earl of Mornington, born in 1735 in Dangan Castle, near Trim, in County Meath, Ireland. He was a talented musician on the violin and harpsichord. He became the first professor of music in Trinity College. He was highly regarded as a composer in his day. He wished to send his sons to Eton College, so he moved to England. However, he died at the young age of 45, heavily in debt, leaving his wife and growing family penniless. The eldest son of 21 years, Richard, quickly took over the reins and by selling off the family estate, managed to avert the crisis. He made sure that all of his siblings got a good education. The only member of the family to show a talent for music was the second son, Arthur, who played the violin. Other than that, he was a mediocre student in contrast to Richard, who had excelled in Oxford as a classical scholar. Arthur was unhappy in school and was shy and socially awkward. His mother despaired of his prospects. Instead of Oxford, he was sent to the French Royal Academy of Equitation in Angers. That was a riding school. The proprietor, Monsieur de Pignerol, recommended him as an Irish lad of great promise. A commission was then bought for him in the British Army, where he steadily rose through the ranks. Now, is anybody ahead of me? Who is this Irish lad of great promise we are discussing? He was to go on to be the Duke of Wellington, who commanded the Allied forces which defeated Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. Now it's time to get one thing out of the way. Wellington, although noted as a wit, never said, when asked if he was an Irishman, just because a man is born in a stable doesn't mean he's a horse. This has to be the most successful example of malicious political libel in Irish history. It was Daniel O'Connell who made the statement when referring to Wellington during an election campaign, because Wellington was opposed to repeal. Another saying concerning stables is also sometimes attributed to the Iron Duke. When told that there were some homosexual hijinks going on among stable staff, he is reputed to have stated, "I don't care what they do as long as they don't frighten the horses." It's most unlikely that he said any such thing, as the saying has been attributed to numerous individuals. But here are two other statements attributed to Wellington. "Yes, my lords, it is mainly to the Irish Catholic that we all owe our proud preeminence in our military career." That, of course, is referring to the large number of Irish soldiers in the British Army during the Napoleonic Wars. Another quote, "I glory, my lords, in the name of Ireland, and it is the highest pleasure I can ambition to be thus united with the rest of my kindred in the grateful task of closing the wounds which 7 centuries of misgovernment have inflicted on that unfortunate land." I'm not sure if those quotes are verifiable, but it begs the question why we don't hear those statements ever quoted, but have to listen to the stupid joke about being born in a stable quoted ad nauseum, despite it being repeatedly debunked. We seldom hear also that it was Wellington, as Prime Minister, who got the Catholic Emancipation Act passed through Parliament against vehement opposition, and who persuaded the mentally unstable, alcoholic and drug-addicted George IV to sign it. Let's go to the year 1800. The Wellesley family has changed their surname to Wellesley for some unknown reason. Richard Wellesley was Governor General of the Presidency of Fort William, Calcutta, the former English trading post that was now the capital of British power in India. He was the British government representative in Bengal, even though that state was still officially part of the crumbling Mughal Empire. It was administered by the East India Company. The East India Company, though operating under royal charter, was a private merchant corporation, the granddaddy of all modern multinationals. It governed a powerful business enterprise whose trading tentacles encompassed half the globe. It had its own navy and a huge private army which at one time outnumbered the British Army, believe it or not. Here's a little interesting bit of trivia. This is the East India Company flag. Does it remind you of another famous banner? and here it is contrasted with the Grand Union flag, used during the initial stages of the American Revolution, which evolved into the stars and stripes with which we are all so familiar. Some surmise that the stars and stripes is thus derived from the East India Company flag. Who knows? But what is sure is that the East India Company played an unintentional but crucial role in the outbreak of the American Revolution. In a bid to help the company out of financial difficulties, it was granted a monopoly to supply tea to the American market. This was taxed by London, and the colonists showed their displeasure by having a mighty hoolie called the Boston Tea Party. And what follows is, well, you'll have to Google that for yourself because I'm way off topic. Let's head back to Hindustan. Richard's secretary was his brother, his military advisor, another brother, Arthur, the future Duke of Wellington. The various campaigns in India were to hone Arthur's military skills, which he used so successfully in the Peninsular War, and finally in the epic encounter with Napoleon on the plains of Waterloo in 1815. Let's take a musical interlude. One of Richard Wellesley's objectives was to ensure that the southwest coast of India was not under French control, and his brother Arthur helped achieve that objective. This area is known as Malabar, a name that will be familiar to many because of this song.
In my dreams I often wander to a place so far away, where I met my little dark eyes at the closing of the day. In the harbor where we anchored, I can see her shy and sweet, with the roses round her bosom and the white waves at her feet. Come to me, my little dark eyes, come to me, my Indian star. Come and tell me that you love me on the coast of Malabar.
That was the famous folk singer Jimmy Crowley, songwriter, song collector, playwright, and curator of all things Cork. Nowadays, we don't have to travel far away across the ocean to find the Maid of Malabar, because it is from that region, the state of Kerala, that most of our Indian nurses come. Many assume that the coast of Malabar is an Irish song because of its popularity in Ireland. It is actually an English Victorian parlour ballad. Lyrics are by Frederick Weatherly, music by Stephen Adams. That was the team that gave us Britain's most popular hymn, The Holy City, also known as Jerusalem. Frederick Weatherly was, of course, the prolific songwriter who wrote the words of Danny Boy. Weatherly never visited Ireland, and it is possible, if not probable, that the lyrics originally referred to a Scotsman. Ach, sin scéal eile mar a dheirfá. We won't go there. Stephen Adams was the pen name of Michael Maybrick. Both he and his brother have been identified as Jack the Ripper, the notorious East End serial killer, all under the most flimsy and outlandish evidence, it has to be said. Getting back to Richard Wellesley, besides overseeing the first widespread extension of British power and influence on the Indian subcontinent, he established an educational institution which was to have a profound effect on the language makeup in India. He established Fort William College in Calcutta. Despite strong opposition and problems with funding, it became very successful. Scholars in the various languages were brought from all over India. At the time, the major spoken languages were completely neglected. Persian, which was a foreign language, was the language of the Mughal ruling class, of the court, administration, the legal system, and literature and arts. Arabic was also important in the Muslim community. The ancient language Sanskrit was used by the Hindu Brahmins for religion and literature. This was no longer a community language. It existed on the same level as Latin in Europe in the Middle Ages. When the administrators of Fort William College set about teaching the ordinary languages of the common people, they found it hard to find teachers. There were no textbooks, no grammars, no dictionaries, no prose books. They had to set out from the very basics. First, to develop a movable type for the different scripts. A very difficult and arduous task. Soon, Fort William College was churning out vast quantities of books through local presses that had been established by British printers. The great Indian classics were produced for the native market. They were also translated into English, thus exposing the British and Irish reading classes to the great literature of India. And generating a vogue for all things Oriental. The great works of the European Enlightenment were also made available to large numbers of Indians through translation. Fort William College also collected ancient manuscripts from all over India, and this formed the basis of the Indian National Library, one of the most important in all Asia. This bringing together of the greatest intellectual minds of Indian and British scholarship in Fort William College was one of the most important factors in the genesis of the Bengal Renaissance, the most important social, artistic, and literary movement in 19th century India. This Renaissance occurred not in any of the native Indian states, nor in the great urban centres of the Mughals, but in Calcutta, the centre of British power. Now, this may not sit comfortably with the popular narrative with which we are all familiar, that the British just oppressed, exploited, and impoverished India. But that is not the full story. Lest I be accused of being an apologist for British imperialism, all the information above comes from Indian and Bangladeshi sources. The last and one of the greatest members of the Bengal Renaissance was this famous poet, Rabindranath Tagore. This statue is in Sligo town. Now, what is a bust of a Bengali poet doing on the streets of a provincial town in Ireland? All will be revealed soon. Here is another bust in St. Stephen's Green, Dublin. Tagore was one of the most important literary and artistic figures of the early 20th century. He was a polymath, an all-rounder, novelist, short story writer, essayist, philosopher, composer, songwriter, musical producer, and artist. Here are a few samples of his artwork. He created a whole new genre of Indian song called Rabindranath. His output was incredible. He wrote thousands of songs. The Indian national anthem is one of his songs. Another became the national anthem of Bangladesh. So the Indian national anthem is not written in the national language of the country, Hindi, but in Bengali. He not only drew inspiration from classical Indian music and Bengali folk traditions, but also from Irish and Scottish songs. He was already an established poet in India when he arrived in England with a bundle of English language translations of a selection of his own Bengali poems. In London, he was introduced to the Irish poet W.B. Yeats, who took him under his wing and introduced him to a wide circle of important literary figures and publishers. Yeats already had a great interest in Indian spiritualism and Hindu mysticism, and he wrote poems on these themes in his early works. Yeats assisted Tagore in selecting, correcting, and editing his poems for publication. They were published in 1912 with an introduction by Yeats. That's the Sligo connection. The anthology was called Gitanjali and was a huge success. Many more editions followed in the same year. Gitanjali was the work that resulted in Tagore becoming the first non-European to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. Of course, besides Gitanjali, he wrote almost exclusively in Bengali, a tongue that had been elevated in a short 100 years from a neglected lower-class vernacular to a sophisticated literary and academic language, thanks in no small measure to Fort William College and Richard Wellesley. It is interesting to draw parallels between the Bengali and Irish languages at the start of the 19th century. Both had a substantial literature from ancient times, but had declined into a largely oral tradition, very rich but of low status. Bengal had basic open-air schools in the villages called pachalas, the equivalent of our head schools. Unfortunately, there the similarities end. Bengali is now one of the most widely spoken languages on the planet, while Irish, although widely taught, is on the verge of extinction as a community language. Let's have a listen to another clip of the song which we heard at the beginning of the presentation. That is a Tagore song called Ohe Doyamoy. The solo singer is Retswana Chowdhury Banya, popularly known as Banya. She is a main exponent of Rabindra Sangeet, the songs of Tagore. The choir are students of Shura Dara, a prestigious music school established by Banya in the Bangladeshi capital, Dhaka. I don't know if you noticed there on that in that video, even though Bangladesh is a Muslim country, there wasn't a hijab or a headscarf to be seen. Banya has recorded, wait for it, 2,233 Tagore songs. Yes, 2,233. Wow! Talk about a mammoth task. How long did that take, do you think? I am surmising that a great number of the lyrics must have been using similar or exact same tunes. The lyrics of Ohe Doyamoy were written by Tagore, but he borrowed the melody from a Thomas Moore song, Go Where Glory Waits Thee. And that was the first song in the first volume of Moore's most successful enterprise, The Irish Melodies, one of the most popular song collections of the 19th century. Moore's song is still very popular in Bengal and Bangladesh. If you add Tagore's lyrics, there are hundreds of uploads. What is curious is that alternative verses of the English language, Go Where Glory Awaits Thee, and the Bengali, Oe Dayamai, are often sung together. I couldn't find any uploads on YouTube of the song from Irish sources. I was disappointed, but not surprised. There is one recording of Go Where Glory Waits Thee with a lovely Irish traditional arrangement with uilleann pipes, but that is by a German. So there you have it, a strange but fruitful triangular relationship between Moore, Yeats and Tagore. However, the triangle is incomplete. One side is missing. Although Tagore admired Moore and Yeats raved about Tagore, Yeats was very dismissive of Moore, to say the least. Thomas Moore was known as the Bard of Erin, and I think it only fitting that Tagore became known as the Bard of Bengal. I will play you one video at the close of this presentation by a group called Wings of Wishes that I find particularly appealing. It starts quietly in English, but quickly moves into Bengali and ups the tempo with some interesting arrangements. Enjoy. In the next stage of our global mystery tour, we will return to the adventures of Moore in North America. I hope you'll join me then. Godishan, Slán agus Beannacht. Bye for now, or as they say in Bengal, Poredek Abe. Wait for the video.
Oh, where glory waits thee, but while fame elates thee, oh, still